Hello and welcome to You Talk Too Much, the podcast where I turn my incessant chatter into a platform for insightful conversation. Today I am joined by the epic actor and writer Neil Linpow. Neil is responsible for some short films such as Time, Lesson 7, Little Debts, which we will get into as well, and of course the psychological thriller Little Bone Lodge. Neil, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm really good. Yeah, it's nice to see you. It's been a little while.
It has been a while. How's things going?
Yeah.
Just wild?
Yeah, it's been such a strange year. Obviously the film that we made together came out in May last year.
Yeah.
And that kind of catapulted a bunch of things, and then obviously that all kind of then got hit a little bit by the strikes that were happening in the States, because I think there was definitely a knock-on effect over here in terms of the amount of projects that were sort of moving forward, and I think that we're not necessarily out of the backside of that yet. So
Yeah.
it's been strange because it's that sort of classic hurry up and wait type situation. Everybody was expecting some lots to be happening,
Yeah.
and then it just kind of slowed for a beat. So it's been a strange time, but it's all about, I suppose, sort of like finding the things to keep yourself motivated and busy and working through those quieter periods, I suppose. So that's what I've been doing, that and family stuff.
Fantastic. So I'd like to go back to the start, as I said to you before. So
Right,
let's
yeah.
kick things off with, where did life or your journey begin? You can start,
That's a big question.
Yeah, you can start as young as you want, or just career-wise, whatever you wish.
I don't know. I mean, I grew up in a pretty, I guess, kind of a small town on the south coast. One or two. I've got an older brother who's a couple of years older than me. We were both massively into sports growing up, and I think my parents were always really good at sort of encouraging us into our interests, which both happened to be sports and movies. That was the kind of two things that we were both really interested in, specifically football. And I think we both kind of gravitated towards that, and we both focused on having careers in football, and both did to moderate success. My career kind of ended pretty early when I was in my early 20s. I had been attached to some professional clubs all the way through my teens, and was at Portsmouth until I was 17, 18, played for Gillingham for a little while and a couple other teams, and just sort of slowly kind of fell through the sort of professional scene, played semi-professionally until I was in my early 20s, and it just, you end up in this sort of place, I guess, where things aren't quite working out exactly how you wanted them to, and you start to get distracted with other things. I was finding I was getting injured more often than I'd ever done before, so spending quite a lot of time trying to stay fit in between injuries, but also then sort of finding that, the enjoyment of football starting to fade away slightly as I was finding other things that were distracting me, and also just sort of this realization that perhaps the thing that I thought I was going to do with my life maybe wasn't the thing I was going to do with my life. And that's pretty tough, and I think especially back in, that time when I was in my late teens, early 20s, the understanding of, I guess, how to communicate with young people, or how to, especially like, men's mental health, I think in those days, and support networks for young athletes just was non-existent, and I think I definitely really sort of struggled to have a real sense of identity without football. I remember there was this time I was probably about 22, and I had just had a really shocking time with football. I'd spent most of the season injured and not played particularly well. And I think it was the first time I realised that this wasn't going to work. This wasn't going to be the thing that I was going to do. And I kind of realised at that point that I didn't really know what else I liked. And football clubs, for instance, like, they're super supportive of you when you're a commodity or when you have value to them. It's like all through my teens, these family liaison officers and football support people will be at your house. Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, you can, of course.
They'd be there all the fucking time. They'd be over like once a fortnight for dinner and to chat you up, especially because there was two of us that were playing.
At that point, are they basically trying to sell you the dream?
Yeah.
Or is there more? I'm probably giving them a bad name. Is there more care to it than?
I mean, I think they'd like to. I think there's good intentions, you know, because there's so many kids that they're dealing with. Well, because I think the thing is, and I'm taking this literally. You asked me a really simple question. I'm kind of taking this off.
Feel free, yeah. I love this, yeah.
Like it's really weird because with football, for instance, like I didn't know these statistics until more recently, but it's like 0.01% of young people that get involved in football actually have a career in football, and that, you know. So you think even that when I was in the professional setups or professional clubs from age 12, like there were hundreds and hundreds of kids that came through. Even like, you know, I was at Portsmouth from 12 to 17. There would be like loads of kids that would come in and trial and do whatever. And, you know, they might spend a couple of weeks at the club and then leave. There was a core group of us that were there for pretty much that entire time, you know, that sort of 5 or 6 years. When you get to the end of that, you know, when you get to your apprenticeship, which is an apprenticeship in those days, I think it's a, you know, academy now, but like you'd maybe like 5 or 6 of you would get that, and then as a professional contract, maybe 2 of you would get that, and then of those 2, you know, of all the people I grew up playing with, really only a couple of them actually had careers where the average person will know who they are. Yeah, you know, we'll remember them having played, or now as we're older being in management or coaching or whatever. But most of the lads, I don't know what happened to them, but they certainly didn't make it as professional football players.
It's quite crazy when you think about, and especially like if you take English football, the pyramid is so big.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like even, I don't like isn't even going right down because the standard is still there, like going right into like National League South and all that. To even be playing at that level for some people is it'd be incredible.
Yeah, I mean, in
for
the
your
standard
average player, you know, like,
but the standard is still, you know, you say there's still certainly now you'd still need to be the expectancy of a, you know, of somebody who plays at that level is that they're training every day, you know.
Even if they're part-time, they are doing some form of...
Yeah, I mean, but I think this is it, you know, and like you need to live right to play that. And I think in the late 90s and stuff, you know, the canteen at most professional football clubs, you've got, you know, at lunchtime you can get like, you know, chips and you know, sausages and ketchup. You know, it was mad. Yeah. It was like before the real influx of continental influence into football, whatever. But I guess the point being, like, I kind of stopped playing and I just had no real sense of identity because I'd always been that guy. People would always say to me, growing up, I was Neil, the football player, and people would always sort of say to me, like, "How's the football going, mate?" You know, I can't think of occasions where people would be like, "How are you?" Because it just wasn't really. I was associated so heavily with football. So when you don't have that anymore, then I guess you don't really know who you are. And I don't think I had the kind of the understanding that was what was going on in my head then. I think it's only with retrospect that I can look back and think that I must have had some sort of identity crisis or sense of like of loss, really. Yeah, like I didn't almost know, a
grief type.
Yeah, like I didn't know who I was really, or what I liked, or what I was interested in. So the only other thing I had to fall back on that I loved was movies. And I had grown up, you know, I always had this like, madly deluded sort of sense that I would have a career in football and then move into making films. So when the football career, you know, but at the highest levels, you know, I was going to sort of play for England, I was going to do all those things, and then I was going to become a movie star, which is mental, right? So obviously when the football didn't work out, I remember I was in this, I was labouring on a building site, going through a breakup from a relationship, living in a really boxy little sort of 1-bedroom flat that I couldn't afford, and just sort of thinking, I need to get the fuck out of here because this is just not for me. And I moved up to London, and I just sort of started again from scratch. I didn't really have any connections up here.
So how old were you about then when you decided?
23, yeah. And I thought, right, I want to make a go of this. And I just sort of started trying to find my way into working in film. I wanted to be an actor, but I also, you know, I had this sort of, I guess, misspent youth of watching so many films. I always had like an intrinsic understanding of story, I think, and structure. So I knew I wanted to make films and ideally be in them, but as sort of, you know, time progressed and whatnot, you know, you I guess you sort of find the things that you're good at or the things that you want to be good at, and you kind of steer yourself towards those, if that makes sense.
That thing of sometimes, no matter how much you want it, your career ends up finding you rather than you finding it almost. And you did have your football career, and that chapter closed, and you move into it. And
it's funny because I didn't play football for years. I remember I was probably about 31. My brother had come back. He'd had a career in the States and done some other bits, and he came back and he was in the UK, and he was like, "Oh, if you don't play, you should play again one more season. Because if you don't play again now, you're going to be too old to play, and you'll miss it." I didn't even play for fun then. I didn't even play five-a-side or anything. And I got back into it. I played one more season 11-a-side, and that kind of it was the first time I enjoyed playing football in years.
Yeah.
And now I play, you know, casually on a Tuesday or a Thursday or whatever with a group of people, and you know, I don't take it too seriously.
Just a laugh at that.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that's the thing I miss, is the banter, the camaraderie that you get from being part of a team. Yeah. So I have that now, which kind of helps. But
and I suppose you do get that in a sense. Well, you know, you do get that because it is teamwork creating films, and
yeah, definitely.
It's not, although you, as you see, you might be a writer or a director. It is a collaborative process. And
100%.
All visions have to come into alignment, essentially.
Yeah.
So you obviously moved to London. You want to go into performing and being an actor. Was the writing always there, or was it the goal to be an actor, and then writing happened, or how did they interlink?
Yeah. Well, the goal was definitely to be an actor, 100%. I think the first job I ever got working on a film set was as a runner on a feature film, like a British feature film that had some really awesome actors in it, like, you know, some really great older British and American actors, and then some up and coming actors who, you know, they're not up and coming anymore because they're established people, but at the time they were like, you know, in their mid 20s, and now they're, you know, a couple of them are big stars. But yeah, I was like the picking up the rushes, which was like, you know, it was all shot on film, and I'd have to drive it out to the processing lab in, where was that? It'll come to me in a minute, but like, you know, miles away, and I'd have to drop it off there, and then sort of pick it up and pick up the digital files in the morning, drop them to the editor, and then I would just get to set. I wasn't required to be on set, but I would just be there, and I'd stay out of the way, and I'd just watch and
taking it all in.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I got to, as I say, I got to see, like, you know, some incredible actors working, and I knew I wanted to do it, but I was so naive. I remember sort of thinking, oh, there's a part in here that they hadn't, you know, that's got like 3 lines. And I remember sort of saying to, you know, so I've always been reasonably confident in talking to people if the situation allows itself. And I remember I was, you know, introduced, because I was working through the production department, I was introduced to the producers and stuff, and I said to one of the producers, I could do this part if you haven't cast that.
You know what? Why not?
Yeah. And they were very kind. They were like, oh, that's lovely. Yeah, thanks so much. But, you know, they had an actor for that part. But I'd done things like short films, and I really, you know, I didn't train, but I really just wanted to work. And I tried to write a script for the first time back then. And I had this idea that I thought was, you know, kind of cool. And I started to but I didn't have any clue. How do you write, you know, not only like from a purely logistical point of view, as in like what software do you write it on? Like, how do you format it? Irregardless of that, I just didn't even know, how do you go about sort of like, you know, basically trying to block out the structure of a narrative, you know,
especially for film.
Yeah,
because
100%.
I think a lot of people, and I might be speaking out of turn, but a lot of people, their introduction to writing is maybe a play because they maybe study that at drama in school. So but even there's similarities, but they are written differently. And obviously, at certain points, you're writing out shots that you want, or like establishing stuff.
Yeah, for me, it's about, you know, which I've learned later, it's about sort of like having a sense of, you know, understanding what your outline is and knowing the entire sort of story before you sort of write page 1 in house, you know, John walks up the stairs, because that's basically what I tried to do. And it's like, I don't know where this is going. I kind of have I know what I want this to be about, and I've got a couple of cool scenes in my head, but I don't know where this is going. You just get lost. You get sort of like, you know, 30-40 pages into this sort of meandering nonsense, really, where there's a couple of cool moments in it, but you're like, what is this, you know? So that got parked and just put away, and I never really thought about it again. And, you know, I'd say in terms of acting, I had like a really, really middling, like lower to middling sort of like degree of success. And I think a lot of that, you know, it was due to, it's so, as you know, it's so competitive, it's so hard. And I think, like, you know, removing talent from it completely, even for a beat, even just not even considering whether I was any good or whether I was not, just sort of the breaking into the industry is so hard. And it's certainly, if you haven't sort of gone through channels which kind of introduce you to casting directors, agents, whatever else, you really are sort of ice skating uphill to a degree, you know. So I just kind of was trying to figure it out as I went along, and I kind of had, like, you know, an understanding of where I needed to go and what I needed to do. And the way I kind of likened it always was that I know that there's a party out there, or there's an inner circle, And everybody that's kind of busy or that's working is kind of like stood around that circle just waiting for their opportunity to step into the middle. And it's like, I don't even know where this fucking circle is. And I've just been walking around for almost a decade with my arms out looking for this circle, being like, I know it's somewhere. And it took, to bring it back to your point about the writing, it took a mate of mine who doesn't work in film at all. He's one of my mates from home. He's a tradesman, and we were on a lads holiday, a stag do or something a few years back. And I was lamenting how my shitty luck. And he was like, but I don't understand it. He said, like, you know, because you can write. You always wrote stories and stuff at school, and like, you know, you like writing. And at that point, I was now working in advertising, like as a writer. And he was like, you can write. Like you've got a pen in your pocket. Why don't you just draw a circle on the floor? And then other people will come and stand by yours. Other people that are looking for that circle will come and stand by your circle. Yeah. And it was a really, really good analogy, because what essentially, you know, what he was saying was just sort of start creating your own work, and people will be inspired by that, because everybody's trying to create something, you know, and that was really the sort of catalyst I needed to start writing stuff. Because the thing is, like, you know, creating your own project is really sort of the only opportunity that you ever have as a creative person to actually control your output or what it is that you're doing. I mean, for instance, like, I think that, you know, as an actor, I'd had like a really kind of minimal to moderate success for the longest time. I did get to play about 2011. I got cast in a studio film that was shot out in Italy for about sort of 6 weeks or so, and it was one of the lead roles. And I was super excited. You know, it was a young cast of cool actors, and we went out and I had a great experience making the film, and I really thought, okay, this is going to be, you know, this is going to be sort of like a big opportunity, and the film came out, and you know, it was fine. The film was fine, but nobody really watched it, you know, and it didn't really sort of pick up much traction. Just kind of, it just came and it got moderately decent reviews, nothing great, nothing bad, and it was gone. And you know, I just kind of realized that you know, like it's you wait so long for something to come along, and if it doesn't sort of take off in that moment, then you are sort of set back ever so slightly.
You almost sell yourself the dream.
Yeah, I was a little unlucky at the time. I lost my mum as the film came out, which meant that I had basically sort of been unavailable to, you know, to really kind of like try to capitalize on the sort of potential meetings and stuff that were going to come from the film. But at the same time, you know, ostensibly, like, it didn't sort of kick open the door like I hoped it would. And then what that kind of leads you on to is this sort of place where finding your niche in the industry, I guess, or finding the thing that works for you, it becomes really hard, because, you know, you're still scrambling for opportunities, because you don't get to control what you do. So you're sort of, you know, you're trying to get castings, and you're looking at the work that's being offered to you. And I found that a lot of the things I was being asked to do really were not things that I wanted to do or that I felt interested in. And, you know, a couple of times I took things that I didn't think I was going to have a great time doing, or didn't really feel super like connected to, and I didn't enjoy it. And then you start, it opens up a completely different door where you're like, this is so hard in the first place. I have to sacrifice many other things in order to be available to do this job. And then if I'm not enjoying it when I'm doing it, then what's the point? Yeah. You know,
it's not giving you any gain in anything at that point. Then financially, it's probably not helping you out. No. Personally, it's definitely helping you out. And then career-wise, it's not. Yeah. It's just like a flat line then, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. So I sort of just got to this sort of situation where I was like, I'm just going to say no to the things that I don't think are going to be enriching for me.
And how was that received by... I mean, I'm assuming you had an agent at that point, yeah? How was that received then?
I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I think they lost interest in me very, very quickly after I started. Yeah, because there were things that they were... I think when you have a good relationship with your agent, it's about communicating a plan and having regular kind of like check-ins on like, you know, what's the goal here, and how do we go about doing this. And I think that, you know, I was maybe a bit nervous to do those things, and I was being pushed in a direction I maybe didn't want to go in. I said no, and then, you know, that was it really. The opportunity started to dry up, and I found that when things did come along, you know, it was they were just sort of becoming less interesting, the things that I was now being asked to do, you know. So So I'd sort of like, you know, taken a segue, I guess, into writing in advertising primarily, and I got to work as an EP for some incredible, like really incredible filmmakers, big Oscar-winning directors, and I really got to see how they work, and you know, help them. Like we would get the scripts that would come in from the advertising agencies, and would work with them on their sort of approach on how to pitch those, and then how to then sort of like, you know, shape the scripts to work with the creatives, but also to do what the director needed it to do, and then be on set with them and sort of go through the whole process of making these films, albeit commercial work.
So were you involved in the writing of those commercials, or was it more of a executive?
No. So it's an EP. So what would happen is the agency would, the creatives within the advertising agency would come up with a brief or come up with the script, and then that would go out to the companies that I worked for, where we have a roster of directors that we represented, and we would, you know, usually it would come in specifically for somebody, asking them to look at it, or otherwise we would suggest the right people. I guess in some respects, kind of like an agent, like you know. And then we would then have to pitch on that. So we would basically have to write a pitch deck or a treatment or whatever to how we would approach this job, or how that director would, and the director would talk to the creatives on calls, and then you would just basically be their kind of like, you know, their pen and their ear, and then, their right hand man really, through that process. And it was amazing, but I learned a lot for sure, 100%. And I would say one of the things that I learned, which was the most heartening of everything I learned, is that even the people that are fucking amazing often don't know what they're doing. So imposter syndrome is real. And I say when I say they don't know what they're doing, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. It's like they have the same problems to deal with within. They're like, okay, like how the fuck do we solve this? Yeah. You know, and they're figuring it out, and it made me kind of, it was encouraging, because I was like, oh shit, it's okay that I don't know what I'm doing a lot of the time, as long as I'm sort of prepared to support myself with the right people and listen to the advice and whatnot. And then the other thing it made me realize was that ultimately I was building a career that was servicing other people's creativity, which, when you come from a creative background or have creative aspirations yourself, can be quite frustrating, because all you're really doing is supporting somebody else to make the thing that they want to make, and you're not really sort of like, you're not creatively influential in that project, you know. So it definitely inspired me to want to go and make some stuff.
So did you start doing your own stuff while you were there? The side type thing?
Yeah, I did, but that came about again in like another really weird way.
Life is a weird thing.
So basically, like, as I said, I pretty much shelved the acting to a degree, because, you know, like, it wasn't fulfilling.
Did you have a knowledge that you would want to go back to it? Or was
I always wanted to.
Yeah.
I never wanted to stop, but I just was like, I guess I'd got into this place where I was totally aware that the prospect of the phone ringing, it being my agent and going, there's a part in this new Spielberg movie. You know, I'm not talking about above the poster, but just like, you know, anything, you know, there's a part in the Spielberg movie, they want you to go in and read it. That shit was gone. That wasn't happening. I was getting like 1 or 2 lines in shows that stuff I wouldn't watch, you know. Again, no disrespect to that it's all, you know, it's all good work, but it's just not work I wanted to do. So I had sort of like really kind of like just sort of parked those aspirations. And then a friend of mine had written a film, and they had they had made a short film, and it had been seen by the Safdie brothers, who made Good Time and Uncut Gems and a bunch of other things, and they loved this short film. So they optioned the short film and kind of put together they brought in a writer that was friends with myself and this director, and they went to work on writing a script for a feature, and I helped them in the really early stages of this. And then they were, you know, and obviously as it started to move forward, there was not really a place for me, because I wasn't going to be a producer on it, I wasn't writing it or whatever. But the writer and the director were both like, look, we're going to write something in here for you, something that we think would be great for you. Fast forward 8 months to a year, and they're going into pre-production, and they've hired a casting director, and they've started to, you know, look at this. And I guess the two Safdie brothers had come off of their film Uncut Gems at that point, and then we're now a little bit more hands-on in the development of this script. And I suppose, much like their own films, they were kind of really interested in hiring a good sort of established talent in the lead, and then they wanted to hire a lot of real people in the other roles, that made the film feel super authentic, which I think was a great way to go.
Yeah.
But also meant that they wouldn't see me.
Yeah.
You know, for the part that was written for me.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't, you know, it was set in a criminal world, and I wasn't from that world. You know, like I wasn't in prison basically, and it was so frustrating. It was maddening, really, to be like, okay, even though when somebody's fucking written something for me, I can't even get an audition for it, you know? And I was sitting outside of a pub, and this will kind of link it to our connection, really, because I was sitting outside this pub and with a mate of mine who was a camera operator who had shot on a lot of big movies and TV shows, but wanted to be a DOP, wanted to light and shoot his own stuff, and had felt he'd sort of waited too long to do that, and was now stuck in the, you know, in the system within his role. We'd had a couple of beers, and I was whinging that couldn't even get an audition for a film that was written, part that was written for me. Yeah. And he said, "Well, look, why don't you put together a self-tape and just send it in?" And I was like, "What's the point? Just sort of sit in my house and against a white wall and shoot something." You know, or okay, well, why don't you write something, write a monologue, and I'll get some gear from a rental company, and we'll go and we'll shoot something. I'll have something for my reel that looks like, looks a little bit, looks nice. Helps you, and you'll have a scene that you can use. So we went and did that, literally, cost about 150 quid. We found an old abandoned police station in Peckham. We went in, made it, dressed one of the cells, the holding cells, to look like it was like, still operational, and shot a monologue of me just talking on the phone, and sent it off to the casting team. No one fucking watched it, and that film went into turnaround. It never got made. I think they're trying to make it with somebody else now, and good luck to them.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe they'll.
So it never even happened anyway.
No,
so.
Maybe they'll let me audition this time.
Yeah. Silver linings at the end of the day.
No, I mean, they're lovely guys, and I really,
and
I know how fucking hard it is to make anything. So I really hope it gets made, but it didn't get made at that time. But I had this 3.5 minute long casting tape, and I thought, well, it works as a short film, so because it's contained,
Yeah.
So we sent it into a couple of film festivals, and we're just super lucky that people seemed to like it, and it won some awards, and it got picked up, because I was working in the advertising industry, got picked up by a lot of the advertising trade sort of mags and websites and stuff, and got some decent exposure. And all of a sudden, it kind of made me realise that, that was kind of easy. I made this sort of, it was a proper write the theme tune, sing the theme tune thing, because nobody had asked for it,
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, well, maybe if I actually sort of planned to make a short film rather than just sort of a casting tape, let's see what we can do with that. So I wrote another short film and directed that, again, just because it was out of necessity, and was in that. Again, it was just me in it, and that did really well. That was less than 7, and that also did really well. And we got to play at some big festivals and won some decent awards and things. And it was I guess again, it was like probably now for the first time ever that people were watching stuff that I was generating, and people were kind of a little bit more interested in what it was. And at the time, I was working for this production company where on the roster of directors was Matthias Hohner, who we both know. And Matthias had seen these 2 short films, and he seemed to be very positive about them. And then we went into lockdown. There was COVID, and
it's the typical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything's on the up, and then it's like.
Well, actually, do you know what? I'll be honest. As rough as COVID was for so many people, there's a lot of good that came from it for me.
Yeah.
Like I had just had my first kid, so I was at home. I got to spend a lot of time with my son, and it's time that I wouldn't have had I been at work.
Yeah.
I also, part of my job, I was charged with trying to figure out, like, how do we keep working in advertising? How do we keep making films in COVID? But also, there's only so much of that you can do. There's only so many conversations you can have.
Yeah.
So I had downtime, and Matthias had sort of got in contact with me. We were chatting about, well, how can we be productive through this? And he mentioned that he had a relationship with this production company that had made his first feature film, that they had a line to financing for films up to about $500,000. So nothing, like cheap as chips. But he reckoned that coming out of COVID, people would want to make films that were sort of more contained, set in 1 or 2 locations with a couple of actors that could be quote unquote sort of more COVID friendly. So he said to me that both your short films are set in pretty much one room with one actor. Like, do you have any? And they're both genre films, really.
Yeah.
So it's like, can you come up with anything that sort of does that? but for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
So I've been watching a lot of true crime stuff over. I think everybody's just like killing the Netflix documentaries, right? So I've been watching a lot of true crime stuff, and I just thought, for anyone who's not seen Little Bo Notch, which is probably a lot of
do
people,
a little synopsis. Yeah,
I guess, well, this is sort of a mild spoiler, I guess, but I just I wondered what it might be like. There were a lot of sort of missing persons documentaries and stuff, and I just sort of wondered what it would be like if sort of a famous missing persons case, was uncovered by two unwitting people. Yeah. Sort of 15 years later,
who stumble across
it, basically, in the middle of it. But yeah, so it was, and then that way you could contain it all in one place, and you could have minimal characters. So I sort of pitched this idea, because I had this background writing treatments and pitches and stuff like that. So I pitched this idea to Matthias, and he liked it, and then we wrote up a pitch treatment and sent it to this production company, who, it was proper, like, string the chump along sort of stuff. They were like, yeah, this all looks all right. We're not going to give you any money to write it. Yeah. But, if you can deliver a script based on this treatment, then we're interested.
Yeah.
So I had the time, so I wrote the script. And as I say, going back to the earlier thing about how you go about writing something, what I'd kind of learned at this point was the outline was so key. So I had essentially written the entire story from almost like you might go about a short story. Like, if you've ever read any Cormac McCarthy stuff, the guy that wrote like No Country for Old Men and The Road and stuff, he writes in a way it's really easy to read. It's like they go here, they have a conversation about this, they do that. It's like it's less sort of like in the character's head and more sort of action driven. So I tried to sort of knock out all of the beats in the story, so that you kind of, when you're going back, you have this really developed blueprint. So when you're going to write the script, essentially you've got all your scenes and all your beats, and you're just kind of adding dialogue
and filling it in a bit.
But you understand what all the kind of emotional arcs and things like that are, and so before you start writing, you understand what's working and what's not. Like, okay, this character, it doesn't feel like this moment is earned or whatever, so you can get all of that stuff done before you start trying to write a script, and then hopefully you're less likely to get lost. So I wrote the script, and that went in I think in like September 2020, and they came back to us, said that they liked it and they wanted to make the film, which was awesome.
From that, so it wasn't any rewrites on that initial
script?
Oh no, yeah, it obviously was.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where people are like, it's so funny because this process from like, we want to make it, to actually making it, in itself is a whole new journey, because it becomes, and this sort of ties us into the acting stuff, it all then becomes entirely sort of like cast value dependent, right?
Yeah.
So one of the biggest issues that you have with writing a film for yourself, because that was the thing, that was the other thing I should mention, is that Matthias and I, when we talked about it, it's like he had made this sort of cult British film, which was like super successful in its genre of like a horror comedy, and then he made this big epic kind of like feudal Japan sort of comedy kung fu type movie, which was like for a much bigger budget, like, I don't know, like $40-50 million movie or whatever. And I think that it hadn't been as financially successful as they had hoped, and it meant that he was in this place where he kind of wanted to go back and make something smaller and more intimate again. And I wanted to, as wanting to be an actor, or having been an actor who was kind of like, felt like I'd never really had the opportunity to see it through. I'd written this part for me, and that was the deal would be that he would direct it and I'd be in it. So,
and had you and Matthias, you'd come to that agreement?
Yeah.
We knew as much as you can.
We knew that going into it. We were also so crucially aware that at any point I'm going to try and kick either one of us off the project. But the agreement being that, well, I don't want to make this film. He's been instrumental in creating this project with me in terms of sort of like, giving me the impetus to write it, giving me the introduction to the people that would produce it and finance it and everything, and he understood it intrinsically. He kind of knew what it was, and for me, I still owned all the IP, so there's absolutely no way I was ever going to do a deal with anybody to make it unless I was going to get what I wanted out of it, which was, because at that point, I had a full-time job, and the money that we were going to be getting to make this film was so negligible that it wasn't like anyone was going to sort of like convince me to let them make it if I wasn't in it. It wouldn't have made sense. I mean, had they sort of come at me saying, right, you know, we've got Tom Hardy wants to play this part and we're going to have a $20 million budget, then you're like, okay, well, that's a real thing, you know. But it was never going to be that. So it would have been, I would have been stepping aside for an actor who they would have felt more confident in. But the reality is these days, and this is the whole value thing, it's like there's very few actors that actually have, like, you know, if you're going through Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever, that you stop and you go, oh, it's their new film. I'm going to watch that because they're in it, regardless of what it is about or whatever. Like, there's very few. There are lots of amazing actors who are in awesome things that you'll watch. But I don't know. Is there that many that you'll watch just solely because they're in it? I don't know. So I was thinking, well, you know, unless you're going to have that, then all you're going to get is someone at home just being like, oh, that's that bloke. I recognise him, as opposed to not recognising me, you know? So anyway, that was the kind of, that was the, you know, the motivating factor for me, was to write something for me. And then we had to get someone to then finance that. So I'd always tried to write it, having been in production, even albeit on the advertising side. I had a good understanding of how films get financed and what the requirements are. So I tried to write the other characters where you could bring in, you know, people that had value, that had commercial value. So, you know, then we put the film out to cast. We were really lucky to get, you know, some awesome actors that met for it, or that wanted to talk about it. We had a list of, I mean, the film's out now, so I can probably say stuff that I feel maybe I couldn't have said before.
I was going to ask you, when you had the script sent to the company, and obviously, I mean, at the end of the day, you're making a film that is financed. You want, whether how much or how little or whatever you get from it, fine. Put that aside. You want it to be even a slight commercial success, you know.
Well, it was only fine. I say this was the thing. This was the funny thing. They were sort of saying, the people that were financing it were saying, like, you know, at that budget level, you know, we don't need like a huge cast, like names or whatever. But then they read the script and you know, so for instance, the lead character in the film is a 50-year-old Scottish woman who lives on a farm. And they sent us a list of actors that they would like us to consider, and they were all in their 30s and American and smoking hot, you know. And you sort of look at it and you're like, have you read, why the fuck do you want to make this film? Like, this is not what this is not that. In my head, this character looked like Frances McDormand, you know. But they you know, they were really good, and we had a list of actors that we liked, and right at the top of that was the actor that we got for the part. We were very lucky. You know, she took a bit of convincing to do it, but we, you know, we did manage to get her to do the film, and I think that, you know, she had that perfect balance between being A, right for the part, and B, having that commercial value which made them feel comfortable to finance the film.
She was also extremely passionate about the project as well. She did get involved. She helped a lot as well, you know. She didn't just turn up and expected. No,
I mean, I think you can't on a project like that, where it's literally being made for buttons and you know, there is literally like nothing glamorous on that set, you know. And she we did have some coffee and ice cream on the last day, right? But that was about it. But the thing with her, I don't know why I'm not saying her name, Jolie Richardson. The thing with Jolie is to do something like that is a bit of a gamble for her, because obviously she has been in so many big films, and she's really sort of like, you know, she's from like such acting royalty, like, you know, that lineage. So to come off of a set that she's just been on of some huge sort of like, you know, Netflix TV series, to then come on to our set where, you know, like, it's everybody's super hardworking and professional, but we just don't have any. It's no frills, you know. Like, she just really, really, like, you know, mucked in, and she cared massively about the project. Like, you know, from a physical standpoint, like, her character goes through a lot, and that's her. There's no stunt doubles. That's like her getting punched in the, you know, getting knocked to the floor, and like, she was great. And the film, not only would it not exist if she hadn't done it, I don't think that we could have expected anybody to come with any more energy or passion for it than we got. We were so lucky.
So was that part the one that you were more keen to have as, say, the commercial drive to that, or did you really mind if it was the other two? Or
didn't really think. I knew that. So the other two sort of leading roles were the younger two characters. So we kind of knew that we were going to get people who were like developing, up and coming, and we got this awesome actor Harry Cadby, who has now gone on to do like a big Netflix show himself and some other bits, and then Sadie Soverall, who, you know, but had come off of a Netflix show, but she's now like, you know, she's in Saltburn, and she's like, I think that new Nick Cage film that she's in that's just played at South by Southwest has got like, you know, 100% like positivity reviews and stuff. It's meant to be great, and she's really gonna go on to do amazing things. I think they both will. So we were super lucky that we cast the other parts really well, and then obviously other awesome actors like yourself and Cameron Jack and Jamie Melrose and Sharon, and
Cliff as well,
Cliff, and you know, we just got some really really great supporting character. Because the thing is that when you have a film that's only really got 10 people in it, and essentially Roger, obviously Roger was brilliant. You only really have 10 people in it. You have to make all of those characters feel rounded and important, and you have to have great actors that come in and do that to make it all feel like, you know, elevated. And we were we literally couldn't have got a better cast for it.
It wasn't. I think everyone was on the kind of same wavelength of, this is going to be as good as the work we put into it, and we want to rise this project, because I think we were all, from everyone on set, crew, runners, every single person, just really we really cared, and it was long days especially for the core group of people that were there every day, all day, whether it be rain, hail, I would say shine, but there wasn't really much of that, crawling through mud, like cold. It was just, but. No. Everyone, as you say, mucked in.
100%. I think I got this really great piece of advice from another friend of mine, a director, a few years ago when I was making one of my shorts, and he was like, look, what you got to remember is that no one gives a fuck about your film as much as you do. Yeah. So if you can surround yourself with as many people who do care about it, it will be better. Yeah. And what we did with Little Bone Lodge is that we had a lot of people who were stepping up on that film. So for instance, like, you know, Nuha, who was our production designer. It was her first time that she had been the lead production designer on a film. Same like so the DOP that shot my first short film and then went on to shoot my subsequent short films. He's the DOP on Little Bone Lodge, Job, and he did an amazing job. And again, he had been the lead operator on some huge projects, but it's the first film that he was going to be the DOP on, first feature. So he brought a crew with him that had all just stepped off of 6 months on a big TV series that all had, you know, had nice paycheck for that, to then come and take almost no money to come and do our film. But you had people stepping up, so everybody kind of had an invested interest. Like even some of the, you know, production assistants, it was the first time that they'd ever worked on a film. There was Rob, for instance, had just come out of the army. He was a captain in the army,
and he was an absolute, pardon the pun, trooper.
Yeah, he was a legend.
I'll never forget when he was running around with that
Artem,
just going mental, and it was like the best thing in the world. And if you asked him to run, he ran. It was very much like.
But he cared because he wasn't jaded by being, you know, because I think there's a danger sometimes on bigger projects. You can, you know, it's just, this is work today. I'm going to work today. You know, and I think that we were really lucky that for most people this was a little bit more than that, you know, and that shows, I think, because you make a film, you know, that essentially cost less than the catering budget for the average British TV series, you know, and we've managed to sell it all around the world.
It was 21 days filming as well, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, it was meant to be 20 days, and then ironically we got an extra day because of that huge storm, which which basically you know, like halted us for a day. But yeah, we, you know, commercially it's sort of gotten out there, you know, which is kind of amazing for a film so small anyway.
Where can people go and watch that just now? Because it is out now.
Well, it came out pretty much everywhere in the States. It's out in the States. Here you can, if you've got like a Sky Movies subscription or Now Movies, it's on there. It's part of the package. Otherwise, it can be rented on like Amazon Prime or Apple or any of those other platforms. I think in America it's on a streaming platform out there. It's been in the cinemas in a bunch of.
It's got a different name in the States as well, isn't it?
Oh,
we always forget this.
They called it The Last Exit.
The Last Exit,
which is just, you know, bizarre, but it is what it is. They do that quite a lot, I think.
They
change the name of films.
Do you know? Is there a reason for that, or is it just different producers, different people?
Yeah, we got on a call. So we were picked up by this distributor in the States. It's funny. They're very nice people, but they also, they asked me and Matthias if we wanted to have a call with them, which is very nice, you know, because obviously, you know, they were doing the deal with the actual producers, and we had a chat with them, and they talked about what the plan for the film was, and it was like, you know, we were going to go theatrical in the States, and you know, and we were going to have this online release and all this sort of stuff, and then we didn't hear anything from them. And they said at the end of that call, they were like, oh, but one thing that we do want to do is that we want to change the title, because we feel that Little Bone Lodge is a little bit kind of genre specific, and we kind of want to make it a little bit more like a thriller film. But the title that they picked at the time was one word title, and it just had absolutely nothing to do with the film at all. And I remember sort of thinking, well, what is it? You know, they wanted to call it Nocturnal, and I remember saying like, well, why do you want to call it Nocturnal? And I said, because it's set at night. And I was like, yeah, but it's also set during the day. I don't know. It doesn't really feel like it has much to do with the story to me. But anyhow, they were very set on, they wanted to change the title. It was like and our finances or producers, whatever, they didn't care. They were happy. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I couldn't give a shit what it's called. It would be nice if it was called the same thing, because it's easier for people to find. But they allowed us to sort of send in some suggestions, and one of the suggestions I sent in was a variation of The Last Exit. I think I called it The Last Exit to Nowhere. I actually wanted to call the film, right from the get-go, I wanted to call it No Place Like Home, because it felt like it had a double meaning. But you know, no one ever went for that. So it was called Little Bone Lodge from the initial pitch. So for me, that's what it's called. And you know, I forget sometimes when people talk to me and call it The Last Exit. So
it's The Last Exit in the States, Little Bone Lodge everywhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
Check it out. It's a fantastic film, and you'll see the cameo from yours truly.
Well, we should talk about how, if it's okay. If we've got time.
We've got a little bit of time. Yeah.
I was just going to say the interesting thing about the casting was obviously, like, you know, for me to get cast in the film, even though I'd written it for myself, I still had to convince them that, you know, that I could do it. So we, rather than me just do a casting tape at home, we made a little short piece where that was not taken from the film, but was like almost like a
prologue, wasn't it?
Like what happened like 2 days before the film starts, and to put that character that I was going to play into, but not in the context of the film where it's like a horror thriller, but just like put that character in his natural environment. But we also wanted to be smart and not use any of the other characters that are written into the script at that point, because we would never be able to do anything with that short because it wouldn't be the actor that we maybe got for the film. So we were introduced to you by our casting director, and you and I played this awesome scene, which was, thank you very much, the thing that convinced them enough to let me do the film. And then off the back of that, we then wrote your character back into the main film. So,
which I'm very grateful for to be a part
awesome
of.
To have you there,
it was a great 4 or 5 days with the team. And it was
that's really good.
Before we wrap up, I do like to ask 2 questions.
Okay.
So the first question is, let's go back 10, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to talk to a younger Neil, what bit of advice or what would you tell Neil of 10, 15 years ago?
Oh, wow. That is another good question. See, I think the thing is, like, I wouldn't give myself any advice to change anything, because ultimately, you know, if I changed anything, I wouldn't be sitting here with you now. I wouldn't have the family life that I have. I wouldn't have experienced the things that I've experienced. But I think the advice I might give myself would be to be more present, you know, because I think a lot of the time you're thinking about what it is that you want or what it is that you're going after, and you're not really kind of, life can pass you by a little bit. I think there's a reason why I sometimes, when I'm struggling to be present and I'm thinking, I'm frustrated, maybe it's like, okay, I'm 41 now, and, you know, I've finally sort of got a little bit of momentum. Why didn't I do this when I was 31, you know? And I have to remind myself that there are reasons why I didn't do it. It wasn't like I wasn't interested in doing it. Maybe I hadn't got the life experience at that point. Maybe I didn't have the connections to be able to go and make that first little short film that I made. Maybe I didn't have the skill set to do it at that point. Or maybe I needed to spend 5 years being like distracted by other hobbies in order to be able to grow emotionally and physically, you know, mentally, to do these things. So I think the advice I might give myself would be to celebrate my wins when they came. and sit with my losses and understand that they're okay too, you know, and be more at peace with them.
Yeah. My final question for you before we wrap up is the same question, but if you were to be able to tell or give Neil 10, 15 years in the future, where would you want to be? Is it advice?
I mean, really, I know this is such an obvious answer, but I think when you become a parent, your priorities do shift and they change quite a bit. Like 15 years time, I want my children to be healthy, happy, you know, and have been given a grounded sort of like set of tools to be able to go and live, you know, their lives. And from a career aspirational point of view, yeah, I would love to be able to be making things that I'm interested in, whether that's writing and directing things or being in things or both. Ultimately, I just, you know, I'm excited as to where it's going to go. I try not to predict it or think too much about it, other than just sort of what I can control in the moment, which goes back to like trying to be present in the now, in the moment, and being aware that I have these goals and aspirations, but also aware that they can be fluid, and that you know, what am I comparing myself against? You know, or who am I comparing myself against? Because you know that's never going to be something that you can truly kind of achieve or fulfill. So just allow this to be what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it's perfect. Neil, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Maybe we'll do it in a couple of years' time when more things happen and more things drop.
Yeah. No,
thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you, mate. Cheers.